Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. Today I have yet another control spawn guide for you, and today we're going to be focusing on protocol. That is the second map in my control spawn guide series. The first one was Vault, so if you missed that, feel free to check it out. For those of you who's somehow this is your first spawn guide from the channel, first of all, welcome. I have done all of the hardpoint maps that are currently in ranked to play, so you can check them out in my recent videos if you want to. But this is a control, and it's specifically for protocol, and hopefully it's going to make you a much better protocol control player. Now, for those of you who think spawn logic and control are relatively easy to understand and fairly logical, and you don't really need a guide to work it out, I'm here to prove you that you sometimes do need to know the details, okay? Because there are some really bizarre spawns, some bizarre spots that do influence the spawns, and it could mean the difference between a win and a loss. It could mean the difference between a 3-2 win and a 3-0 win, which will get you considerably more SR and increase your potential SR going forward. So yeah, hopefully this is going to be valuable information to you guys. Again, this will be documented in a written format with a diagram in my file, which I will leave into like my ranked play guide, which I'm constantly updating and constantly updating, sorry, as I produce guides for YouTube, which you can find a link to down in the description below if you prefer to learn that way. So we're actually going to kick it off here. By the way, I've got a little bit of soundtrack in the background. Let me know if, shout out to whoever can guess what game this is from. You've got good ears if you can tell, especially over me talking. So let's start off with the video here. So there are three main spawn points on offense, okay? So this is the offense side. This is where the trees are. You've got the helipad here. And this is the side the offense team spawn on, the attacking team, sorry. So the three main spawns are the right side of trees, left side of trees, like back at slightly left towards that, like the middle of the spawn, and then BS and D in the blue zone, okay? Now, the offense players spawned blue when the furthest enemy pushed up on the defense team was in these blue areas, okay? So if the defense team were pushed up to these areas at most, this is when the game would use the blue spawn as that spawn. Now, when the defense team pushed up a little further up the map and were found in these areas, okay, these new pink zones, the enemy started to spawn pink. Okay, so fairly logical so far. I will summarize this in a second, so bear with me. Weirdly, when the defense team was pushed into this very specific area here, the game considered the safest spawn for the offense team to be right side of the trees in this yellow zone. So let's try and simplify this in a big altogether guide for these three first spawns we're going to look at on this side of the map. Now, essentially, if the defense teams who spawn on this side of the map, if their team's furthest player is in the blue zone, the offense team will spawn blue. If their furthest player pushed up is within the pink zone, so they've moved past this zone here and they're pushed up towards pink, the enemies will then spawn, or the offense team, attacking team, will spawn in this pink zone here. Now, if a single defense player is pushed up within this yellow zone, whether they're on the heli or they're on this elbow, the enemies or the attacking team will actually start to spawn in this yellow zone here. And it's a really defined line here, which I've done on purpose, because if you cross over from this yellow zone to pink, the enemies will go from spawning yellow to pink. So it is that definitive in-game. So if you do want the enemy spawning yellow, you literally can't be past that side. You've got to be either top of the stairs or further back towards elbow heli in order to spawn the enemies yellow. Now, unfortunately, it's not that simple. There are two other spawns as well as the three main ones, okay? And these happen for specific reasons, which we're going to get into very shortly. So these can be found, so red, which is in P3, and then elbow, which is orange here, okay? So they're the two sort of alternative spawns on this side of the map for control. Now, the red spawn is used when the furthest player pushed up on the defense team is, bottom pool, torture room area, back radio, that sort of area, okay? So if no one on the defense team has pushed past here, the enemies are likely to spawn red in P3, as long as they've got teammates pushed up towards A, okay? And they've got teammates pushed up this side, so the teams are almost magnetized to a better spawn point, and you're rewarded for the map control by spawning here. Now, the orange spawn occurs, it's almost like a more dramatic, a more enhanced version of the red spawn here, because it spawns you even closer to the middle of the map. And the reason it's done that is because the enemies are even further into their spawn. So they're not even pushed up to radio. They're not even pushed into torch room. They're not even at the top of the stairs going past the castle here. They're really right in the back of the spawn. Your teammates have probably got A control here, which is where this green mark is. And as a result, the game, again, is rewarding you for having that much map control. And they've spawned you pretty much on the objective. They're spawning you elbow, okay? Now, putting this all together in a really, hopefully simplified version, if there's one screenshot you want to take of this, or there's one thing you want to remember or print off or have up when you're playing this map mode combo and you're on this side, is this one. Okay, you have all 5 spawn points here, and you have 5 coloured areas across the rest of the map showing areas where the furthest pushed up defense player has to be for an enemy to spawn in that same coloured spawn point on the other side of the map. So let's take some scenarios here like we do on Hardpoint. Now, if you find yourself spawning in orange or red, so P3 or elbow, it means the enemies are pushed all the way into their spawn and barely into bottom bunk pool building. So you're likely able to get into the middle of the map quicker than they are, so make the most out of the map control while you have it. So if you find yourself spawning here, you're safe a few seconds off of spawn, so you can just run out, get on the objective, stack the point, etc. Now, if you spawn blue, it means the furthest enemy pushed up to mid-gun. Okay, so if you spawn BS&D, it essentially means the enemies are behind this blue line. So you've got some safety, but not as much as if you were spawning at these 2 spawn points. If you find yourself spawning in the pink zone here, they're right at the back of the trees, but not quite this far back. It essentially means you could have enemies pushed up towards A, you could have enemies pushed somewhere close to elbow, likely in P3, and potentially pushed up towards like your top zip through B area. Okay, maybe they're on this head glitch here on the stairs where my cursor is currently. Now, final spawn, if you happen to spawn back yellow, which is deep trees, like deep right trees, it basically tells you the enemy has pushed around the elbow area of the map, and they're potentially got this left-hand side of the map control covered, and therefore you've spawned as far away as you can from them. Don't forget the spawns don't flip on control, so there's no risk of that, which is why you're pretty much constricted to these 5 spawns. So to strategy, if you are defending, let's say you are spawning on this side and you're trying to defend and control the spawns, you ideally want the enemy spawning at a point where, 1, they spawn far enough away from the objective to be annoying, which is ideal, and 2, their push out of spawn is obvious and readable. Okay, they're the 2 things. You want them spawning far away from the objective, and you want them spawning somewhere where it means their pushes out of spawn are relatively easy to read. Now, I'd recommend trying to have the enemy spawning yellow, which is likely to happen, and what's likely to happen when they spawn yellow is their push is very obvious. Okay, they're likely to spawn here and go, okay, let's go B. So they just run to B, which means you can literally have people in P3, potentially bottom P4, looking at the cross to B, and then have enemies pushed up here, making sure they can't get around this side. And that essentially just funnels them into that one route, makes them super easy to read. Now, I'd then suggest that when B is the only objective left to capture, your team tries to position themselves so that the enemies are spawning pink all the way back here, because yellow's a little bit too close to B. So you try and position your team so that the enemy spawn pink, which is ideally the best one to have when the only objective left is B. And I'm not saying this one because it means they can get to the stairs quite easily and just hop up to middle map. So get the enemies to spawn pink and have people evenly spread throughout the map, across the map, keeping them in their spawn. So let's take a look at the flip side of this. Let's take a look at the defense spawns. So the 3 main defense spawns here are back castle in pink, back useless in yellow, and then back radio tower, which is in this blue zone. Now, defense players spawned yellow. So the players who are spawning this side spawned yellow when the furthest enemy pushed up on the offense team were in these yellow areas. Okay, so there's quite a lot of enemy, like it seems to just be the default spawn here. And it's safe to say that you'll likely find yourself spawning here over and over again, unless the following things happen, which we're going to get onto in a second, which will cause you to spawn at the other 2 points. Okay, so this will probably be the main spawn you see yourself spawning in on the defense side. Now, the blue spawn I saw used in 2 situations, okay, which you can see here. So the first one is if an offense player, so someone spawning on this left-hand side here, managed to get through A, pushed up towards tin, and are in sort of in this general vicinity, that'll stop you from spawning yellow because you're too close to it. It'll stop you from spawning pink because, again, you're really close to it. And the furthest possible spawn for the game to spawn you is blue. So that's one way you will spawn blue. The second one is if no one is on the offense team are pushed up past P3, then the blue spawn opens up. So if they've not really pushed out spawn much, they're not anywhere near this top side, because don't forget, if they're over here, they're closer to blue than they are the other 2. Pretty much if they're in this area here, you like to spawn blue as well. And that's why the blue spawn is typically used. They're the 2 main scenarios I saw when I was reviewing VODs and doing my research. Now, the pink spawn seems to be used when the offense team gets a little bit aggressive towards B side, so a little bit on the flip side, a little bit the opposite to the blue, and a push towards the B side of the map, maybe in P2, maybe to push towards the pallet heady, so on and so forth. Okay, they're just pushed up this top left-hand side of the map just here. Okay, and that's when that pink spawn will open up. So again, combining those first 3 spawns we're going to look at, we can clearly see here that the defense team will likely spawn yellow most of the time, so long as the offense players aren't pushed up past the yellow zone. Okay, if they do push up past the yellow zone and they find themselves over this side, it will mean the blue spawn opens up. If they push past the yellow zone and they're pushed up this left-hand side a little bit further, the pink spawn opens up. Okay, it's relatively easy to understand. Now, unfortunately, again, on this side, there are 2 other alternative spawn points. One finds itself in Torture Room, and that's the orange spawn, which we're going to call Orange or Torture from now on. And then the other one is the side of Tin, which is I've made red. Okay. Now, the orange spawn in the Torture Room is utilized when the offense team are no further pushed up than this orange. It sort of looks brown on my screen, not quite color, but let's call it orange. The offense team are pushed up no further than this orange zone. Okay, so when the enemies are sort of behind this orange zone, like so, where sort of where my cursor is now, that'll mean that the orange spawn opens up. However, you do need to have someone in order to have this spawn used. This team who spawn here need to have teammates. So defense players towards A. That's the only way to magnetize that spawn, to anchor, whatever you want to call it, the orange spawn to open up. Okay, so you need 2 things to happen in order for this spawn to open up. You need a teammate around A or towards mid-map, and secondly, you need the enemies to be no pushed up further than this orange zone. Okay, so you need ultimate map control, and you need all the enemies to be pushed deep away. We then have the red spawn, which is a weird spawn because it's actually quite far out. It's very advantageous. If somehow you got this spawn, you'd be like, wow, I've spawned halfway across the map. I'm pretty much on A. I can get instant access to mid. And this is a spawn where you don't want your enemy spawning if you're on offense, because it's, as I say, it gives them so much access to top middle. They can get onto A easily, and top middle is a massive, crucial mid-map area that you want to control throughout the whole of protocol control. Okay. That red spawn typically opens up when someone from the offense side is pushed all the way into the enemy spawn and find themselves blocking all 4 of these spawn points. So a very familiar place I saw people, like over and over again, recurring place I saw people spawning the enemies red, where they were just past the Torture Room on this little bit of grass. Obviously, they're blocking this because they're in view of it. They're blocking yellow because they're in view of it. They're blocking the blue spawn because they're in view of it. And they're blocking Torture because they're literally pretty much on that spawn point anyway, although it's past a wall. So the game's like, okay, let's open up this spawn. It's the safest place for the enemies to spawn, for the defense team to spawn, because they've got someone pretty much in our cheeks. So just be very careful pushing this side, because it basically spawns the enemies here, okay? But knowing the spawns are great, because it means that this is why I say this can be the difference between a win and a loss, because if you can see your teammate pushing all the way through to their spawn and you find them in this area, you're looking at the minimap, you can see they're there, you know to watch out for this spawn, okay? You can then sit gun and look right, and you can hopefully catch a couple of enemies coming off spawn here. And they're probably going to be like, bloody hell, did know I spawned there? This is a random spawn. How did they know I spawned there? Because you watched Harrz. That's all I'm saying. So again, let's see this summarized and put this all together. We have the 5 main spawn points on defense, and now 5 coloured areas across the rest of the map showing how offensive teams' position can affect the defense spawns. So let's, again, take some scenarios to put yourself in the shoes of someone actually playing the game. If you spawn orange, orange in the torture zone, it basically means the enemy are all the way back into their spawn, and you have teammates mid-map. It generally means you can get map control pretty easily from spawn, so jump on the opportunity and get map control, get mid-map control if you do seem to spawn here. Now, if you spawn yellow, all the way back here, it simply means the enemy are coming off a spawn, perhaps have middle control, but they aren't pushed far up enough for you to spawn either blue or yellow. So yeah, they have a lot of map control potentially. There's not much to tell from that yellow spawn, just the fact that they're not pushed either side enough to spawn you at blue or pink. Now, if you happen to spawn blue, back radio, it means the enemy are pushed up past A and are likely, maybe spawn trapping you, looking to spawn trap you as you come off a spawn. But they're not pushed all the way into the spawn so that you've had to spawn red. Okay, so they're just sort of in this sort of initial zone, meaning you've spawned here. That's what I'd read from that. Now, if you find yourself spawning pink, it means the enemy has pushed towards the B side of the map, up here, and are likely past this halfway line. If you imagine a halfway line across both objectives, they're past that halfway line. They found themselves in P2. Maybe they're pushed up to radio tower, or they're above P2 towards this pallet heady here, and they're in this general vicinity. Okay, that's what will cause you to spawn there. Now, if you are lucky enough to spawn red, or unlucky enough if you somehow have someone in your spawn, if you're lucky enough to have the enemies spawning red, it means that the enemy are deep into your spawn. Okay, they're literally in this general area, and they're blocking all 4 other spawn points. So that's from the position of the people spawning there. Let's say you're on the other side. Let's say you're on offense and you're trying to control the spawns. Now, this is how I would do it, okay? You ideally want the enemies spawning, again, similar situation to when we were on the other side. You want them spawning where, 1, they are pushed enough, they're spawning far enough away from the current objective to be really annoying. And 2, their push out of the spawn is fairly easy to read, so you can, set up your team to watch that push out of the spawn. Okay, you can just get some free kills, drain their lives, and then progress up the map if you feel like you need to. I'd recommend trying to have the enemy spawning blue. Okay, and when you're trying to capture A, because that's a really annoying place to spawn. It means they either have to, just run through B, they have to run under the P4, or they do a really obvious thing and jump up to P2 heady here, or go up this ladder, which is probably what you should watch for. Okay, so if you can somehow manipulate the spawns, maybe push up the right hand side here, get into this zone, spawn the enemies blue, have the team watch their push, make sure your teammates aren't pushed up this left hand side, because otherwise they won't spawn there, they'll just spawn here. So push up here, make sure your team are watching their push up the ladder, push up the top mid there, and that'll essentially mean that you've got good map control. You can probably capture A unless they go all the way around their spawn to kill you. Simple as that. And that's the ideal way, I would say, to capture A, is just to get that spawn, make sure they're spawning blue, and go from there. Now, I'd suggest when B is captured already, okay, and the only objective, if A is captured and the only objective left to capture is B, your team should try and position themselves so that the enemies do spawn pink. You can clearly see here the furthest spawn point from B is pink. So trying to, maybe have someone push through P2, someone being annoying in middle, that will spawn the enemy pink, and it will essentially mean they've got the longest route and the longest time from their spawn to get to the current objective. It means that your kills matter more because they're spawning further out. You're likely to get the closest spawn if they're, spawning all the way out here. So it's a really nice play that if B's the only one to capture, don't just sit on it and capture it. Push through the spawn, get to radio tower. Don't go all the way deep, because otherwise they'll spawn here. But just get pushed up enough so that they spawn all the way over here, making it really difficult for them to get out of spawn, okay? And that, I believe, is that. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video. I will be doing a rewind video next, and let me know what else you want to see on the channel. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can DM me on Twitter, Discord. You can join the Discord and ask questions there, or as normal, down in the comments below. That'll do from me. Ciao for now.